So, what exactly do you mean when you say, what do you mean?
I do not understand this. This really confuses me.
What's that supposed to mean?
Literally.
What's that supposed to mean?
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you talking about?
What's that supposed to mean?
Cultural anthropologist Ujwal Arkalgud and Motive Base president Jason Partridge will tell you that perception and meaning are the primary pressure points that shape and create the world we live in.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word.
Let's explore why meaning matters.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Now, here's your host, Aaron Trafford.
So the question we are trying to answer, we're attempting to answer, we're uncovering as we go, why meaning matters. And in the last couple episodes, we started to pull the thread around how myths become meaning, become truth, and that there's this whole construct of building a myth and then riding that myth into the truth of where we are culturally, of where we are individually. And one of the things that we touched on at the end of the last episode was this, dare I say it, like the myth of gender and where we find ourselves today in that things are, I don't know, in my lifetime, I'm 38 years old, that gender has completely shifted what I think it means now, or what I was taught it means. How do we look at this concept of gender and the meaning from a corporate perspective? How do you work with your clients on this changing meaning of gender?
Well, I'm going to start with a story because, Jay, I don't know if you remember this, but I got this email from a major retailer, and they were targeting me saying, hey, we have, a new line of gender neutral kids clothes. And I remember calling Jason and forwarding him the email, and we just kind of sat in silence on the phone for a minute. And that's very rare, by the way. If you get to know us, we're always yapping away. So it's very rare. And we sat in silence because the interpretation of gender neutral was the color gray. They just launched a line of clothing that was all the color gray. First of all, it looked terrible. I mean, who wants to dress their children in gray? It's a boring color. Come on. And then on top of that, they completely misunderstood the core concept of what gender neutral could mean, could imply. Nobody there sat back and asked, what should this mean? And, we do so much of this work that moments like these are, dare I say, cringeworthy.
I think it's also one of those moments where, the idea of assumptions make a butt of you and me. That really was the situation. It was the, desire to play in something that is forward thinking and provocative and important for a large group of consumers and people moving forward, but not taking the time to actually consider what does this mean to this group of people that are trying to leverage gender neutral clothing? Why is it important? What are the requirements that will make it relevant to them? And instead, it was basically the most surface level interpretation of it, which is actually insulting.
Kind of like the tail wagging the dog. Like, what do you think, in your professional estimation, what were they trying to make it mean something? Is that where they went wrong with that?
Absolutely. I mean, clearly the intention was right in the sense of they were trying to be in tune with culture, but instead they showed how out of tune, right? Out of sync they were. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, we've studied gender extensively, and, a lot of these meanings are still brewing. They're in myth stage. And by the way, somebody who's listening, just because we call it a myth, I don't mean to imply, I don't mean to undermine the conversation of gender. I'm using this in the context of the model we've been talking about for the last couple of episodes. So please go back and revisit some of those episodes, because we talk about how ideas take mainstream relevancy. They start as myths before they gain consensus and turn into truths. So some of the myths that exist at the moment, early consensus stage, One of it is about literally not feeling ostracized if you're in the boys section shopping for your daughter. That's one example of gender, right? And I'm sure all of us have been in this situation. I mean, there's so many times where I have bought clothes from the boys section for my daughter because she loves robots and the boys section has robots. And I buy that and the cashier will say, oh, but this is for boys. Mm-hmm. And I have to kind of give her a stare down and think in my head, don't fight. It's all good. Just make the purchase and move on. Right? And we've all been in that situation. And the consumers understand this. So this is one such myth that is developing. It is gaining consensus. So that's one interpretation of gender neutral, which is break down the barrier. Put the boys in pink. Put the girls in blue. Break down the barrier. That's one interpretation among 5-6 major interpretations.
So when you say, when you have that moment, and I've had that moment as well, because I have 2 girls and one of whom likes dinosaurs. The dinosaurs are in the boys section. So when we have those moments when, oh, but this is for boys, oh, but this is for girls, we're not going to voice that or have the argument with the cashier. It's not his or her fault. Where do we voice that? How do we as individuals start to say, hey, this is not something that I buy into anymore? How do we start to change that narrative?
I think that, one of the interesting things that Ujwal and I constantly have to remind ourselves is that if you follow and attach yourself to where people are naturally going, you're often surprised at how amazing and positive it can actually be. We're inundated with, kind of media that is constantly telling us about, how bad something is, or what's the worst thing that happened yesterday, or, here's the thing that we need to be worrying about tomorrow. When you start to take a step back culturally, and we'll use the topic of gender as the example, people are naturally coming together to rethink about, how does an individual's rights mean more than my preconceived notions? And while, again, meaning is built slowly over time, what is really, really nice about what we're seeing is that people are naturally coming together and attracting people. I almost think of it like a magnet. Okay. The idea of being open and aware and more cognizant of individuals and their rights to basically express themselves is slowly drawing more and more people to the party, because at the end of the day, people are starting to understand that if they were in that position, that's something they would want people to do for them. Now, again, is this going to hit the mainstream? Is this going to be something that we're going to be seeing, across the board tomorrow or a month from now or a year from now? Probably not. But if we really take a step back and we actually look at where culture is headed, taking that stand is happening naturally, because it's naturally the course of kind of where people and, consumers and, friends and family are starting to realize that they need to focus their efforts.
And I just want to build on that. We're here talking about meaning. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is the fact that it's meanings plural, not meaning singular. And to Jason's point, when we ask what does gender mean to people today, what we're really uncovering is 5, 6, 7 major meanings shaping the future of gender. And what you can kind of think about meanings as if, they're a bunch of boxers. You put them all in a boxing ring. Eventually, 1 or 2 of them will survive. And that's just culture for you, right? And so our job becomes to figure out which of these meanings is more likely to survive. And we can do that by tracking how much consensus it's getting over time, how quickly how strong is that magnet, to Jason's point, right? That's what we have to figure out. And I think it's very interesting because, we talked about a couple of meanings. I wanted to bring up another one. Another core meaning around gender right now is parenthood. Parents are genuinely asking, what do I do? How do I teach a child that I'm raising and give them the flexibility to understand and openly express their own gender to me in the right way? How do I not F this up, right? This is a genuine question that parents are asking. That's another interpretation, another meaning shaping the future of gender.
What's a meaning that you think is going to fall away? Do you see one rapidly sort of being busted and left behind?
Yeah, definitely. The gender binary idea, the biological gender binary idea is definitely, I mean, not 2 years, probably we're 20 years away from that, but it is on the downward trajectory. And, you might be thinking, or as a listener might be thinking, how is this relevant to me if if I run a brand or I run a retail entity or what have you? The reason this is important is because if let's take the most obvious example, you're selling apparel. This is critical to how you think about the future of your apparel business. But it goes much beyond that, because we have implied gender norms in everything, the way we hire, in the way we talk to people. We have implied gender norms in the packaging we put on food products, in partnerships we instill. If we're a gaming company, we automatically assume it's the boys who are going to play the video games. There's so much implied assumption. And so if you understand that, hey, one of the meanings is about helping parents navigate gender, how could I play a role there? Could that be beneficial to my business? And how could I play a role there? And how could I set the stage for the future? That's an interesting question to ask, because it'll take you to interesting places.
But then once again, that takes a lot of courage, right? To step out and be in that place.
But look at what Gillette has done in regards to accepting and taking into consideration that they need to rethink what masculinity means. That's tied to the changes that we've seen in gender. Look at Axe Body Spray, a brand that was literally created for the very purpose of aggressive male sexuality. There's a little bit of hyperbole there, but leave your comments below. But at the end of the day, now they've come back with this new positioning that's all about respecting women and respecting oneself and one's individuality. The reality is that, as Ujwal referenced, we're talking about meanings, not just meaning. And these things are interconnected, and these things are putting tension in the marketplace and reshaping kind of expectations, not just specifically around gender, but in the associations that gender are linked to.
Mm-hmm. I like how you make that distinction, meanings, because especially, as a woman who's an entrepreneur and really aware of these things, I was going to bring up the pink tax on razor blades, right? Like, that has been a thing that we have lived with my whole life, and it's shifting. But I want to believe that the men who made that decision obviously did it for financial reasons, but not because they were aware of patriarchal structures and this and that. So would you say that the next step in this conversation in understanding this myth is getting on the same page with what even the conversation is, how women have experienced culture, how men have experienced culture, anyone has experienced it, and bringing that together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Erin, even the conversation about the pink tax, that is an expression of a meaning that turned from myth to reality, to truth. And now it's a truth, it's well understood. And so now all these big companies are responding to it. But I think the provocation from us, and certainly in our work, is why wait until it becomes a truth? Right? Because then you're not the leader. Because then there's going to be some other small company like the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world that will go and do that. And then all you can do is go buy them, right? Which is what Unilever did. They bought Dollar Shave Club, as opposed to creating their own or leading the way. And I think there's a lot of provocation there. And I think I would love to unpack more of this as we go along. But that's the exciting part about catching the myths, catching the wave at the right time. As a surfer, what's the point if the wave's already gone by?
No kidding. So one of the myths I'm really excited to unpack with you guys is this myth of feminism, what it means now, the shifting meaning. We can talk more about the pink tax, because can you tell I'm on a bit of a high horse about that? Can you tell? Can you tell?
Yeah, and I was gonna say the dreaded F word, but again, to Jason's point, leave your comments below.
Okay. Well, I think that sets us up nicely for the next show. So if you do have comments, yes, you can leave them below if you are catching us on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, whatnot. But what we'd also like you to do and invite you to do is to send us an email with your comments and thoughts. You can do that at hello@storystudionetwork.com. And of course, do not forget to like and subscribe to the show, and please share it with your friends and colleagues who would get value out of these conversations. It really goes a long way to getting this out there and having more conversations about why meaning matters. We'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to Why Meaning Matters with Ujwal R. Colgood, Jason Partridge, and your host, Aaron Trafford.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Why Meaning Matters is produced for Motive Base and the Story Studio Network by Eye Contact Productions.